In my last video, I talked about how starting out in Guild Wars 2 is a bit different from other MMOs out there, and how that is actually a good thing. Once you figure out what you're meant to be doing, that is. Hopefully, that video helped you guys milk quite a bit of fun out of the Guild Wars 2 early game. However, the artwork, soundtrack, and just a new approach to everything stops being so distracting after a while, and you might start to notice some more annoyances. A couple of days into Guild Wars 2, I had an annoying feeling that I just couldn't shake off. See, it's normal for combat to be kind of hard when you start a game, because you're still getting used to the controls, but that wears off after a while, because, well, you've gotten used to the controls. The issue for me was that I had been playing Guild Wars 2 for weeks, and the combat didn't seem to be getting much easier for me. This led me to kinda give up on the game because it just felt clunky or sluggish, and it didn't feel like I was good at the game. It wasn't until I picked up the game a few months later that I realized what was going wrong. In fact, I believe Guild Wars 2's combat system is probably the main reason a lot of new players can't get into the game, which is a damn shame because it's one of the best combat systems I've ever seen in an MMO. I have a lot of thoughts on this, so bear with me. In fact, I think I'll leave the technical and deeper details to the next couple of videos. One of the first things I noticed when I played Guild Wars 2 was that your attacks don't feel like they have much weight to them, and I couldn't actually tell when I was finishing or starting an attack. An obvious reason for this is that only the really important skills have flashy animations, and this makes sense. Guild Wars 2's combat is really fast paced, and landing a lot of flashy attacks in short bursts would just be visual overload. What's more subtle though, and what might stand out for other MMO veterans, is that you can move during a lot of your attacks, and enemies don't really react to your attacks unless your attack involves a crowd control. In a lot of games, trash mobs just die in one combo, or they flinch every time you hit them, or there's a spray of blood. The mobs react in some way that tells you that you've successfully connected a hit. This just isn't possible in Guild Wars 2. For one, your attacks do a reasonable amount of damage, so you can't one-hit everything. This is important because in games where you're dealing a million damage to everything in sight, endgame bosses have to use gimmicks to stay relevant, which Guild Wars 2 tries to avoid. A consequence of this is that regardless of your level, most enemies are challenging enough to survive a few hits, especially because of level scaling. This ties into the enemy reactions. Think about it for a second. The game encourages people to work together on enemies that can survive a few hits. If multiple people are hitting the same enemy, and every attack knocks the enemy back or covers your screen in blood, it just isn't fun. I'm looking at you, Barebow Rangers. A nice side effect of these low impact skills is that attacks like Slash or Backstab can add to the game's realistic aesthetic. Of course, not all skills are boring. The cool skills just have longer cooldown and require forethought for maximum effectiveness. Now this leads on to the whole moving during attacks thing. In a lot of games, cast animations force you to stand still, so I learned to subconsciously associate the end of my casts with being able to move. For a long time, I'd hold down my movement keys while fighting, expecting my character to stay still. This, of course, didn't work because only the strongest skills root you. My frustration was exacerbated when I finally turned off melee attack assist, because then I just ran through and away from my enemies while trying to attack them, because I just couldn't let go of the W key. Turning melee attack assist back on was not an option, because running through an enemy is one of the best ways to avoid attacks. Depending on your gaming history, you might think I'm being silly here, but some of you will benefit from this. Learn to let go of your movement keys, and learn to stop associating your character's motion with your cast times. The thing with Guild Wars 2 is that you actually have to watch your character use the skill you're casting, or rely on the UI to know when a skill has started and when it is completing. Reading your skill UI is very important, so I'll leave that topic for the next video where I can give it the attention it deserves. For now, let me answer this. Why does Guild Wars 2 let you move during your attacks? One of the relatively unique things about Guild Wars 2 is the dodge mechanic. A dodge uses a chunk of your endurance to give you about a second of evasion and moves you a bit in your preferred direction. This is really powerful, so the game needs a way to reward you for conventionally sidestepping attacks instead of dodging them. The obvious reward is that you're saving endurance so that you can dodge when it really matters. But let's get into something a bit more subtle. Dodging cancels your attacks, but walking doesn't. Plain and simple. Early game, you can easily run circles around your slower enemies and avoid all their attacks, and if you do so without dodging, you're not sacrificing your own damage. Late game, this becomes more important because you're now working to avoid boss attacks. A good player cancels their Ice Storm to dodge a fatal attack because a dead person does no DPS. But a better player will find a way to either sidestep or jump out of the way so that they don't have to cancel their air overload. The best player wouldn't have used Ice Storm in that situation, and they would know the boss mechanics well enough to be confident in their sidestepping or jumping abilities. I am not such a player.
Trying is the first step towards failure.
Hopefully it's now clear why so many attacks let you move around and why this is such a crucial part of Guild Wars 2's gameplay. Moreover, it should now make sense why a lot of powerful skills make you stand still. Part of the challenge in casting these skills is finding a safe spot or safe time to fit them in. The viability of sidestepping also opens up some more complexity. For example, if you're running to avoid attacks instead of dodging, swiftness is now a relevant combat buff in that it fills the same role as vigor. Or maybe you want to sidestep an easy attack instead of dodging, but you have traits that benefit dodging, so you might as well dodge. These sorts of details are what add depth to the Guild Wars 2 combat system, and I'll go over them in part 5 of this series. Now that I've explained why Guild Wars 2 allows so much mobility, maybe I'll finish on a few words about positioning. In group content, your priority list basically looks like this. Most importantly, take care of any encounter mechanics and avoid dangerous telegraphed attacks. For this, you should definitely have the AoE rings enabled. If you know you're going to go down, make sure it's in an accessible spot for allies to revive you, and try to rally off of trash mobs. If you kill something, you'll revive yourself. Second, try your best to stay in a position where you can upkeep your DPS. This means that you should dodge out at the last second, or even take the hit if it's negligible. Lastly, focus on staying near your allies so that you can boon share. Boons can pretty much double your damage, and in some cases make you invincible. Again, more details on that in part 5. However, like I said, I'll do the next video on the technical aspects of Guild Wars 2's combat system and how to read and use the UI to your advantage. See you next time.